From potions to pumpkin heads, here's a look at the boss fight studio epic hacks, Grim Spectre, Earth Scorcher. The history of this ancient race remains mostly cloaked in shadow, but within the darkness of that shadow lurk the grim specters, mysterious beings of an almost translucent illumination, clad in mystical robes and carrying spellbooks. Some have hypothesized that the spectral epic hack skeletons are the spiritual leaders of this entire species, opening portals into temporal zones, sending their foot soldiers in to create havoc and chaos. I wonder if these grim specters have any hacks for casting spells. Asking for a friend. Before we get a closer look at the epic hacks, Grim Spectre, Earth Scorcher, I'd like to first thank the folks over at Boss Fight Studio that did provide the sample we're about to have a look at. As I now grab the tape measure, we're going to find out just how tall the figure stands. Now, like the case before when we looked at the pirate, the mystical tormentor, this one does have also swappable options available for his head. We'll get more into that in a moment. In the meantime, though, you're looking at the figure of the Grim Spectre being about 6 1/4 inches in height, or the figure's going to be 16 centimeters tall. Speaking of the mystical tormentor, let's slide over the Earth Scorcher that we're going to have a look at and bring in for comparisons the other skeleton. As you'll see, side to side, the pirate and Grim Spectre are sharing similar molds to one another, although the defaulted head sculpt that comes included with Grim Spectre happened to be the other head sculpt that came included with the other pirate. You'll see what I mean in a second. First, though, let's have a look at the accessories that come included with the figure. Like we did before when we looked at Pirate, if I can actually grab it, does include, of course, the Epic Hacks display stand. It's cast in the exact same red plastic as the one that we looked at before, so they haven't changed the colors at all, but you can see a very nicely detailed display stand. Epic Hacks, by the way, stands for Highly Articulated Character Kit System. In other words, you can mix and match the parts that come included with the figures. And you could also, in theory, use the parts that came included with the other figure. Like, for example, if you like the Mystical Tormentor and want to use his parts, for example, with the Grim Spectre, you can easily do that. You just simply mix and match the parts. But you get yourself a display stand. We'll put that to the side. You also get, as well, included a very large and very, might I say, also heavy spell book. I don't know what kind of spells he's necessarily reading because there doesn't seem to be anything on the page. One omitted thing I really would have liked to have seen, that they could have actually printed something on the book. But I will tell you this. This book is heavy. It also has, what I like is a nice little touch, they also have like a little bookmark on here. There is a peg that I can gather is intended for this piece right here, which in the beginning of the review, I actually attached onto the end of the figure. I only chose to do that, but there's technically a little peg right here that you can also take the other accessory that we could look at, the little flame attachment, which is nicely handled in translucent orange plastic with some additional red added to the end of it. Now, again, I just attached it onto the pointing finger that came included with it, but I'm guessing its main purpose is the fact that it attaches to the inside of the book, which only then adds some additional weight to this. I think they actually did have images of this guy where this was actually sitting on a podium. You don't get a podium. But again, it's a really nicely detailed, very nicely sculpted book. It's just very heavy. To even throw out the notion of this, of actually just bending the arm and bending the hand and rotating the hand, I should say, around, and then just balancing the book as best as I can do it, it just adds so much extra weight. Let me just pick up the book that I just dropped onto the floor here. Yes, it just adds so much more weight to it that I don't think it'd be any bit possible to be able to have this balancing on the figure without adding unnecessary stress to not only the shoulders, but the elbows as well. Again, I would love to see maybe like a little podium. I might see if I can find something in my tickle trunk of accessories, see if I can find something that could actually prop the book upright, because it's a really neat looking book. I just don't know if it's possibly maybe just too heavy for him to have it resting in his hand. Speaking of hands, while we're on the topic of that, the figure comes included with a series of swappable hands. He has, for example, some gripping hands for holding the scythe, one of the other included accessories we've yet to look at. It's molded here in what I could best describe as sort of a Smurf blue. It's a very nice looking blue, though. It complements, I feel, rather nicely the already looked at green that we looked at for the Mystical Tormentor. Really like the color schemes that they're going with for these figures. So you get some gripping hands. Then you get what I looked at earlier as not only pointing hands, but also the available means to take the flame, for example. Not that this is really the intended plan for them, but because, again, like you've got the hole there, you've got obviously a fingertip, I just put the flame on the end of it. It's not really supposed to belong there, but I just kind of thought it was cool the fact that he was summoning fire on the ends of his fingertips. That seems like something he'd be able to do. For all intents and purposes, I suppose, you could also take the flame attachment and then literally just not so much attach it, but balance it on top of his palm if you wanted to do that also as well. Mileage, of course, will vary for how well you can get that to balance. The figure also comes included with a really cool-looking scythe. The scythe is crooked and jagged. It clearly doesn't look like it's been used with a straight stick at all. Speaking of sticks, though, it does have some really nice texturing to it, so it does look like it's made from wood, although it obviously has kind of the more sheen to it that would go along with it being plastic. On the end of the blade, it looks like it's been generously used. It looks like there's possibly blood. I can't imagine that's just from cutting trees alone. It looks like it's been probably cutting more than crops, probably maybe even human bodies. I really like the look of this scythe. Now, you can store this in his hand by obviously the gripping hands we've already had a look at, but you can also take the figure and flip him around to the back. And amongst all the other things he's got going on here with the belt, there is also a little loop here that you can then take the scythe and you can slide it in the back. Now, I did do this at the beginning of this review. I might very well... no, I have other ideas. I have other ideas for what I want to do with the scythe. But there's at least a storage space to store the scythe. Whoosh, that's a lot of S's. Where you can store that on the back of the figure if you don't want to have it displayed with the figure instead. What I do have plans for involves me removing the scythe again, because the figure also comes included with this head sculpt here. Get a load of this head. And while I do really think that they've done such a great job with these skeleton heads up to this point, the moment you start to introduce a pumpkin head, which is literally what it is, there's a hole on the bottom of it that can then be swapped out for this existing head. How am I not going to turn away? How am I going to turn away the idea of actually having the figure displayed with this instead? Just though, before you do that, he does have a hood. He does have a little cloaked hood over top of his head. He kind of reminds me of those old hologram toys that were back from the 80s. What were they called? Somebody's going to tell me down below in the comment section. The hood sits, though, loose, and really, you don't even need to remove the head at all in order to take off the hood. You easily can just slide the hood off the existing head. One thing to note, though, is that this head seems to be the same one that they did release with the Mystical Tormentor, right to the fact that it does also have an open and closed mouth, as this one already did before. Again, I love the blue on this one, but the moment, again, yeah, you got this, I'm going to be swapping this head sculpt out instead. To change the head out, now you can also take this off too, really, if you wanted to, but for right now at least, I'm going to remove the head, detach it, divorce it from the rest of its spinal cord. And really, for all intents and purposes, like if you really wanted to, you could take this off too. But I kind of like the idea that this just finishes off the front of it so it doesn't look like it's just, obviously a rib cage that we're going to be looking at the whole time. So I'm going to leave this in place for right now. But again, the whole idea of the hacks is the fact that you can mix and match the parts if you wanted to. Let's now go and pop the head in place, the newer head that is, and pop that in place like that. And boy, oh boy, does that looks really, really cool. For all intents and purposes, I suppose you probably could take apart the robe if, for example, you would rather have green go with, say, for example, like the orange and the yellow. I suppose you probably could somewhat remove all the component pieces from the pirate, and probably maybe even use his body for this head sculpt instead. And again, just because we've now attached the new head, it still retains all the same articulation as before, but there's something really about pumpkin heads, the Headless Horseman, Sam Hain from the real Ghostbusters. The moment you get something like this in place is the more reason why I would want to have the figure displayed. It just looks fantastic. Coloring's really good on this also as well. You've got the darker color of kind of like the warmer oranges. You've got some nice lighter yellows in there also as well for making up, of course, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. That's a really neat looking pumpkin. And of course, that will then finish off the look if I want to have the figure displayed then with the scythe. To obviously get that all accomplished, what I first will want to do is obviously change the hands out. One of the hands has already popped off. So we're just going to finish the process of now replacing the new hand. We're just going to pop that onto the peg. There we go. I almost have that in there. The one thing I will say, though, about these figures, while everything is really super user-friendly when it comes to changing the parts out, the only thing I will say is like the pegs that they use for the wrists and the pegs that they also use for the feet, and while I'm not really going to be having to worry so much about the feet this time around, I did have to worry about it, though, when we had to look at the Mystical Tormentor Pirate. I just find like these pegs don't always feel like they attach completely into the holes. I really have to kind of fight to get them in there. Once that's obviously then in place, we can go ahead and take ourselves the scythe. This might have also benefited me better by actually attaching the scythe first in hand and then attaching the hand onto the peg. But we're going to then just slide the scythe in between the finger grip. There we go. And yeah, that's going to be the way I'm going to be displaying the figure. I probably could also have him holding it with both the hands, but I just love the look of this guy. He looks like an old spirit of Halloween. Yeah. Let's, for right now, detach all this, put that to the side. Let's get a closer look at all the rest of the details. We've spent, I know, a lot of time looking and discussing the head sculpt. More me on the back behind the camera looking and discussing the head sculpt. But could it be any bit better than this? Just a pumpkin head on top of a skeletal body. Of course, from that down, you've still got the same body as before. Whew, shouldn't probably be revealing that. You still got the regular skeletal body as before, so this is exactly the same as the pirate, just obviously done here in blue instead. But what I do like is the fact that they've added this robe. It's a fabric robe that drapes over top. Obviously, it has real working sleeves. It has sleeves, so he slides his arm straight through but he's got a really cool looking belt. The belt matches the color that he sort of has to the top of his collar piece here, so it's nice, more of like a chestnut brown. Got little bags, I imagine potions, spells, and little things, of course, he's going to be wanting to use to summon things, probably not so good and rather evil instead. He's also got a little pouch there also in the back there as well. Probably a lot of mystical powders that he has in there as well. It's a lot of cool stuff going on. I don't think there's a real easy way. You might be able just to be able to slide this down past obviously the point of his thighs. You might be able to slide this belt off if you wanted to detach it. But like, I don't see there is a section on the belt where you can actually go in there and open it up if you want to remove the belt. But again, like I would ask and pose the question, why would you even want to? Just though for the sake of decency, you just want to make sure that the robe is covering over the front of the legs. But again, like you've got just the regular bare skeletal legs underneath all that. For the articulation here, let's start first with the head sculpt for the Earth Scorcher. The Grim Spectre does have a ball joint, so you can rotate the head all the way around. It does look down this far, it does look up this far, and yeah, you can move it back and forth as well. If only this also had a light source. Yeah, that'd be so cool as well. But really, really happy with how this one turned out. As for obviously the arms are going to be exactly the same as the pirate we looked at before. So the arms come out at 90 degrees on both the sides, so you can form a capital T. You can move the arms forward, you can move the arms back. There is a single hinge only, but it allows at least the arm to rotate back and forth. Let me just roll up the sleeve here so you can see what's going on here. So this rotates back and forth, and there is a fair enough hinge that they've added here, so you get about almost 90 degrees. 90 degrees for that elbow bend. Hands rotate all the way around, just though be careful doing that, because every single time it seems that when I do it, the hands always pop off. He does have a robe, so it's going to limit a little bit of the articulation. He's going to have a lot more of it, obviously, when we looked at the Mystical Tormentor, but he still has that ball joint at the top of his torso, and he also does have a secondary ball joint, sort of where the thighs start. As for the thighs themselves, they're on ball joints, so they hinge outward. You can take the legs and bring them forward. You can bring them back. This is a point I did mention when we looked at the pirate, is I love the idea that they gave us double hinges here for the knees, but I also like the fact that they put the kneecap right in the middle of where those joints would be. Instead of actually just putting a cut right in the middle, dividing that up, they actually put a kneecap legitimately where a kneecap would be, on either side of an ankle joint or on either side of a knee joint. Speaking of ankles, though, the ankles move back and forth this way. They also rock back and forth this way. So he has all, again, the same retained articulation as the pirate we looked at before. Speaking of the pirate, again, we just get the figure to stand here. Let's have the pirate displayed along with the Grim Spectre. Still, it shows to be the case that when it comes to these Boss Fight Studio releases, well, yes, they are using the same body molds. Clearly is the case that they're using one skeleton to the other, but by changing the color slightly from now the green to the blue, of course now adding different clothing on the front of it. The one thing I really also like about the Grim Spectre is, unlike the pirate we looked at before that relied on plastic pieces that went over top of the body, the Grim Spectre rather instead actually has a fabric cloak that you can actually wear instead. So it makes him look even that much different. But I really like the look of this one as well. Like, part of me would think I would love to see maybe them release this Grim Spectre again, still of course including the pumpkin, but giving us different colors for the bodies. I like the look of the blue, but I have to wonder how good that would also look, with the pumpkin head of course included, if for example he had a yellow body, or for example like a brown body, or even just like a green body, something similar to what we got before with the Mystical Tormentor. I may have liked the pirate, but I love what we got here with the Grim Spectre. And to be also attacking on to the end of that, I also like the way the Grim Spectre looks now with the swapped out pumpkin head. He looked good before, don't get me wrong, with the cloaked head, and of course using the skull mask or skull face that we did get already with the pirate. But by swapping out just that alone and changing out to the pumpkin, we've got a completely different looking character, and one that looks so impressively cool, especially with Scythe in hand. That book that had, of course, the flame attachment that we did add, I've already added to the middle of the book. I've got for right now displayed just sort of resting in front of the figure's feet, what feet he has left. I might just still see if I can find myself some way to prop the book up, because I think it's too good of a book just to have resting, and I still think it's way too heavy to be actually displayed in the figure's hands. Not only is it going to cause some stability issue, of course, with the figure standing, whether he has the display stand or not, or if you manage to get it actually resting into his hand, I think you're just adding a lot more stress to the joints in the elbows and in the shoulders. So for right now, at least for right now, I'm going to have the figure displayed with the book in front of him, but I most definitely will be having the figure displayed with the pumpkin head. It looks so cool. It looks like Sleepy Hollow. It looks like Sam Hain from the real Ghostbusters. There's just something about the idea, and of course there's the Pumpkin King before The Nightmare Before Christmas. There's just something about a character that has a pumpkin head, especially one that's got a carved out face, that right away for me thinks Halloween. And everybody knows Halloween is my favorite holiday. Big thank you. Once again, big thank you to the folks over at Boss Fight Studio that did provide this sample of the brand new Epic Hacks Grim Spectre Earth Scorcher, that we could have a chance to have a look at this review. What do you guys think of the figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. Is this a figure you could see yourselves picking up? And if you plan to pick him up, how are you planning to display him? Are you going to display him with the cloak and the skull, or are you planning to display him with the pumpkin? Let me know down below in the comments section. If you guys as well enjoyed this video, we'll hit with a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing, and you certainly do want to stick around for more, by the way, FYI, 411 I'll throw out to you guys. We are going to be looking at some more Boss Fight Studio stuff, so if that's the kind of thing that you like to regularly come back to this channel for, more videos of those will be coming your way. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.